We were discussing linen. The last thing you mentioned about linen in the Mishnah was that linen is the only material that if it's an oil, if it's covering a dead body, the oil itself also becomes tummy. Anything which covers a dead body, whatever is under it becomes tummy. But only things made out of material, out of wool, let's say, only that can become tummy. But things that grow, plants that you turn into material, the only one of those that could become tummy alone is linen. So now we're holding on the third to the last line on Chav Zayin Amud Beis. It's quoting the Mishnah, anything which comes out of a tree, the tent itself does not become tummy, ela pishton, only flax, only linen. Minolan, how do we know that linen is mikabel tuma, that the tent itself is tummy? Amar Rabbi Lazar. So there's a pasuk which tells us that an oil could become tummy, but we don't know which material it is. The pasuk says v'hiza ala oil, that there are times that the kohen has to sprinkle the para aduma on the actual tent, but it doesn't say which type of tent. Amar Rabbi Lazar, Gomar oil mi mishkan. It's a gzeira shava. In that pasuk it says that the oil becomes tamei. So it's something which is called an oil. And in the mishkan, the covering of the mishkan is made out of different materials, mainly wool. The first covering, the colorful covering, was mainly wool, but it had linen as well. Linen was part of the material that made the lowest covering of the mishkan. And therefore, since that's what we call, so let's see. It says regarding Tumas Meis, this is the Torah, Adam ki yamus ba'oyel, if someone passes away in a tent, and then the tent becomes tummy. It says about the Mishkan, Vayifrois es ha'oyel ala Mishkan. He spread out the oil on the Mishkan. So the way we're translating it here, the oil means the carpet, the covering, the material covering on the Mishkan. So the Mishkan is the wooden walls, and you're spreading the oil, the tent on top of it. If you're spreading the tent on top of it, that means that the lowest covering of the Mishkan, which was made also out of linen, is called an oil. Okay, so the problem is really, if you learn Chumash, you'll see that this is not the Pashat Pshat. The Pashat Pshat, where Rashi teaches it, that Mishkan refers to the lowest covering. And oil ala Mishkan is talking about the covering made out of the hair of the goat's hair. But the way the Gemara is learning it over here is that this pasuk is talking about the Mishkan, is talking about the wooden walls, and the oil is talking about the covering, which means this lowest covering, which is also made out of linen. Right? So ma'ala halon shel pishtan, just like in the Mishkan, it also was made out of linen and it was called an oil. Afkan shel pishtan, karo oil. Also by Tumas Meis, which material is called an oil to become tummy? So wool, obviously, but also linen. Says the Gemara, if the whole source is the comparison to the Mishkan, why didn't you go all the way? Maybe malahalon, just like in the Mishkan Shizurin, it has to be, how do you call it? You put a few threads together, you intertwine them, you make them into a thick thread.
Woven.
Again?
Weaving.
Is it weaving? Weaving is when you actually make them into clothing. Can't hear you.
Yeah,
Twisting.
Oh.
It has to be twisted. Like each thread is made up of 6 threads. Or 8 threads. 6 threads. It's made out of 6 threads. First of all, it has to be intertwined from a few threads. And how many? 6. Afghan here also. Shizurim. It has to be made out of a few threads. And how many? It has to be made out of 6 threads. And the fact that you're not comparing it all the way, maybe it means you don't compare it all together. Maybe any material is good. Doesn't matter now. Talmud loymar oyel riba. When the pasuk talks about tumas meis, it says twice in an unnecessary way, seemingly, the word oil. Someone who passes away in a oil, so whoever comes to the oil and whoever is in the oil is tummy 7 days. He could have just said, if someone passes away into the oil, whoever walks into it, is tummy. It doesn't have to say the word oil again. So it's coming to add another type of oil that it would not have known on my own, that it also could become tummy. Okay, says the Gemara, if so, oil, riba, if you tell me that it's coming to add other materials, other types of oil, I feel a maybe it's coming to add that anything could become an oil. In case if that would be the case, Gzeira Shava Mayahanili. The Gzeira Shava wouldn't do anything. We were taught by our rabbis that there's a Gzeira Shava between oil and mace and a mishkan. And if oil, the second oil is coming to say that anything could be an oil, so the Gzeira Shava is useless. And therefore the Gzeira Shava must teach us something, and the addition of the extra word oil has to teach us something else. So what makes most sense? The material has to be like the mishkan, but the exact amount doesn't have to be like the mishkan. Says the Gemara, Ve'ema, if you go, if you have a Gzeira Shava, let's go further. Ma lahalon kroshim, af kan kroshim. Let's learn it like Tosfos. I think that'll be the simplest way to learn it. The Gemara is saying like this, that the Mishkan was a tent made out of walls made out of wood, and a roof made out of material. So maybe that's the only type of oil that could become tummy. An oil that the walls are made out of wood and the roof made out of material. But if you have a typical tent, that the whole thing is made out of material, maybe that wouldn't become tummy. Again, you're comparing it to the Mishkan. Maybe compare it all the way. Says the Gemara, no. Makra, the pasuk says, "Vasisa krashim la mishkan." Make walls out of wood for the Mishkan. Mishkan koring Mishkan. Or maybe you have to say Mishkan koring oil. The Mishkan itself, which is the covering, the material on top, that's what the Torah calls an oil. Vein krashim kriyim Mishkan. But the walls are not called the Mishkan itself. And Mishkan is nicknamed oil, Mishkan oil moyed. So the walls are not the oil moyed. If they're not the oil moyed, so they're not part of the what I'm learning out of it. That's not what gives it the name oil. What gives it the name oil is the roof. The roof is made out of material, so material is good enough. I don't need wooden walls. Right. Says the Gemara, okay, fine. If you're telling me that whatever the Torah says, make this for the Mishkan, that means that this is not the Mishkan. I have a material where it says, make this for the oil, for the tent. And seemingly I can tell you the same thing. The oil is a tent, and this is not a tent. What are we talking about? We're talking about the highest covering, or the highest two covering, depending which opinion, which is made out of skin. Out of either skin of rams, color dyed red, or this tachash, the special animal that they had then in the midbar. So you would be able to prove from that skin, hide of an animal is not mekabel tumah. If it's an oil, it's not mekabel tumah, because the Torah says, "Vasiso michsel la oil." Make a covering for the tent. That means that the covering is not a tent. Now we know that Tanoim took it for granted that skin of an animal, that hide, could be a tent. It is mekabel tumah. How do we know that? Because we'll see that a Tana asked the question, could the hide of a non-kosher animal be mekabel tumah? Which means he took it for granted that a kosher animal is mekabel tumah. But in the Mishkan was a kosher animal, it was dyed ram skin. So l'chayra, and there it says that it's not an oil, because it's michsel la oil. And what we're trying to say is maybe we cannot prove from such psukim.
How do we know the tachash is kosher?
We'll get to that in a second. Yeah? So basically, seemingly this proves to us that when the Torah says, make this for the oil, it doesn't mean that it's not an oil. So when it says make the walls, the wood for the Mishkan, it doesn't mean it's not a Mishkan. And if it could be a Mishkan, then we're back to our question. Maybe an oil has to have wooden walls and a material covering. Let's see it inside. Hello, if you're going to tell me that the ram skin is not considered an oil, Rabbi Lazar asked the question. The hide of a non-kosher animal. Mao, what's the din? She tami boil amaze. Does it itself become tamei? Says Gemara, what's the question? Hashta, if we learn from this pasuk that the covering is not an oil, if so, a kosher animal skin does not become tamei. Is there a question whether a non-kosher animal skin becomes tamei? Of course not. Says the Gemara, no, you're right. If I would just have the pasuk sisa michsa lo'oil, I would tell you that even kosher animals' hide is not mekabel tumah. But I have a separate pasuk which brings it back, and therefore it cancels out that limud. And therefore I say that a kosher animal's hide is mekabel tumah. However, by the crushing, there's no pasuk which brings it back, so I remain by that diuk that it's walls for the mishkan, but it's not the mishkan itself. And therefore, for a tent to be called a tent, you don't need the wooden walls. That's it. Says the Gemara, Shani Hasam, by the animal hide, the kosher animal's hide is different. The Hadar Hadre Kra, the pasuk brought it back. The Chsiv, it says, V'nosu, the Bnei, who's this? The Bnei, the Bnei Merari? No, whatever, the Levim were carrying a Yiriyas HaMishkan, the sheets which were covering the Mishkan. Ves Oyel Moyed, and a second layer, the goats here, covering of the Mishkan. Michseu, the cover on top of that, which is the red ram skin. Umichse atachash, and the tachash skin asher alav. So the Torah says them all in one go. Makish elyon letachton. It's comparing all of these coverings of the Mishkan one to another. Ma tachton, just like the lower one we know, cutting oil is called an oil. Af elyon, so too. The highest one, the one made out of the hide, cutting oil is called an oil. Okay. So how do we know that linen becomes tamei? Because it's a gzeira shava oil. The covering, the lowest covering in the Mishkan is called an oil, and it included also linen. So we know that linen is called an oil that becomes tamei. Why do we not need wooden walls? Because the pasuk says it's walls for the Mishkan, so it's not the Mishkan itself. So why does a kosher animal hide become tamei? If the Torah says make a covering for the oil, because in a different pasuk the Torah says you should carry the lowest covering and the one on top of that and the highest covering all in one go. That means they're all in the same category as an oil. Okay, done with that, done with linen. But we don't let anything untouched. So if we mention this statement, this question about non-kosher animal hide, we're going to try to take that apart. So we're going to ask the question that was asked over here before. Tachash is not listed in the Torah as one of the kosher animals, so maybe it's not a kosher animal. And if so, there you have your answer. You have your answer. It says in the Torah that the tachash skin is also called an oil by the comparison to the lower ones. Let's see. Gufa, let's get involved in the statement we mentioned earlier. Boy, Rabbi Lazar asked the question. The hide of a non-kosher animal, Mao, what's the din? Sheitami tumas oilin. Does it become tummy like being an oil? Says the Gemara, what's this question based on? We know that the materials that could become tummy as an oil have to be learned out of the Mishkan. So give a look. Did the Mishkan have non-kosher animals or not? So that's exactly the question. The question is the tachash kosher? What's the root of his question? The tachash of Moshe's time. What was his question? Tami was it Tami? Or was Tor? Now, if it's Torah, why didn't the Torah list it? Because we don't have it today. The Torah only writes things which are necessary for the future, the halachas which are necessary for the future. But today we don't have a tachash, so even if it's kosher, it doesn't have to be listed in the Torah. Okay. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yosef, mighty boy, what's his question? Tanina, it's a clear Mishnah. The only thing he could use for anything holy, for tefillin, for sefer Torah, for anything holy, it has to be made out of kosher animal skin. So the Mishkan is definitely holy. So if there was a skin used by the Mishkan, it must be that it's kosher animal skin. So what's your question? Okay. Fine. So that's it. So that's an answer. So only kosher animal skin could become tummy with oil and mace. But now we're going to ask questions on that. Mosiv Rabbi Abba asked a question on Rav Yosef. He's going to prove the chayda that a tachash was not kosher. How is he going to prove that? So it says in the Bryce, Rabbi Yehuda oimer shnei michsoi soy. That's the machlokes. If it was two separate coverings or one. Rabbi Yehuda says it was two. One covering is made out of red, ram skin dyed red. And one on top of that is tchashim, made out of tachash skin. Reb Nechemia, no. It was only one covering. Fine. Then the Brisa continues. What does a tachash look like? It's similar. Kamin tella ilon. Can anyone help me in the translations? How do they translate that? It's an animal that has lots of colors on its skin. They don't have the identification on their English Gemara? Does Steindl say anything?
It's got it here as something like a cat. It's a spotted genet.
Spotted genet.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's got a colored fur, and it's like the size of a cat.
Uh-huh. So there's an animal, which is obviously not kosher. We have it today, and it's not kosher, which has a skin, a very colorful spotted skin. And the Mishnah is telling you, the Bryce is telling you, that the tachash was an animal which is similar to that animal. Now, if that animal isn't kosher, and this is similar, which would sound like it's from the same family, so I would assume it's not kosher either. So in the Chayda, I have a Bryce saying that it's not kosher. Continues Rabbi Abba after he finished the Bryce. But on this genet, Tamihu, it's a non-kosher animal. So we see that a tachash isn't kosher. No. This is what he's saying. Kimin Talailan, it's similar to this genet. In the fact that it has a colorful skin. Veloy Talailan, but it's not that genet. The ilu awesome, the Talailan Tami is not kosher. V'achana tachash is kosher. Amar Rav Yosef continues Rav Yosef to justify his own opinion. Based on what I said, that's why Targum Onkelos says Sasgoina. He knew Aramaic, and there's no such word Sasgoina. There's no animal called Sasgoina in Aramaic. So first of all, what happened? Onkelos made up a word because there's an animal that doesn't exist in our times. So you had to give it, some name. Yeah? Or no, the answer is, Sasgoina is not a name, it's a description. Shesos b'gvonim harbe. It's happy with lots of colors. So it's saying two things. First of all, it's not a type of animal that exists today. Second of all, the comparison to whatever animal, which the Bryce is telling us what's the comparison, that it's compared to this Talailan, the comparison is that it's very colorful. So this proves that the only comparison is in the fact that it's colorful, nothing else. Okay. So based on this, the conclusion is it shouldn't be tummy. But the Rava Omar, no, you're right. From the Mishkan, I cannot learn it. But I have a different source that tells me that it is mikabel tumah. The hide of a non-kosher animal, the metami ba'oil ames. That if it's an oil, it's mikabel tumah. Mihocha. I have a proof for it. I have a source for it. Tanya, it says.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Sorry. If it's a treif animal, then what do you do about the klal about belech shemayim and on that?
You have a question. A question doesn't take away a proof. If I have a proof that it's a kosher, non-kosher animal, I have a question. Yes, you have a question against me, fine. So fine, we'll have to deal with it. Don't just say, for sure not. It's not so simple. He said, no, for sure not. Yeah. Okay. The Tani will learn in a brayso. Regarding tzaras, if you find tzaras in a clothing, so it says oy be'oir. The extra word oy be'oir, riba is adding something, as we said earlier, that from the oy we added some things, from the oy beged we added. So here, from oy be'oir, we're going to add something as well. Riba oir behema tmeya. It's adding that a hide of a non-kosher animal also could receive tumas tzaras. Now, Rava wants to learn from that to oil hameis. We'll see how we do that in a second. This shalaka biyat kohen. It's adding something else. It's adding that if the person brought his clothing to the kohen and it did not have the signs of making it tummy. And while the kohen is looking at it, he sees it's growing and it's turning colors and it's becoming the tummy siman. So you might have thought the pasuk says you found tzaras and then he went to the kohen, yeah, and then he tells you it's tummy. But if I went to the kohen and then he found tzaras, he knew tzaras, maybe it's not tummy. So this oy is adding, and that's also tummy. How is it adding two things? Okay, I'm not sure. 1 second. Could be it's oy be. The oy is extra and the base is extra. I'm not sure. But we're adding two things. Another thing you want to add, kotzatz mikulam, if you took all the materials, wool, linen, leather, va'asa achas mihen, and you made one clothing of them. Maybe you made like the leather between the wool and the linen. It doesn't really combine the wool and the linen. And you have one clothing made out of them. And then the tzaras showed up on it. Minayin, how do I know that also that becomes tummy? Says the Brisa. Talmud loimer, oy b'chol melechas oy. The oy be, another oy be, is telling me that also if I made a combination of all these materials together, it's also mekabel tumah. Okay. Now, Rava wants to learn from tzaras to oil hameis. That just like by tzaras, non-kosher animal skin becomes tummy. If it's an oil on a dead body, it also becomes tummy. But there's a problem, says Rava himself. The ikolam mifrach. You could negate, you could argue with this comparison. And you could say, Malan negoyim, how could you learn from tzaras? Tzaras is more strict. Shekin shesi va'edav tummy b'hem. Threads become tummy, and any other tummy does not become tummy. Good. So let's put that aside. And let's try the next try. Gomar mishrotzim. Let's learn out from shrotzim. The Tanya, it says about shrotzim that oir could become tummy. It says in the pasuk that oir could become tummy. Oir, it says the word oir, ainli ella oir. I only know that, ainli ella oir behema tahira. I only know that the hide of a kosher animal can become tamei. Behema tamei minayin. How do I know that a non-kosher animal skin can also become tamei? Talmud loimer oy. There's an oy over there. The oy is adding that other hides are also tamei. Non-kosher animals also tamei. Fine. So let's learn from Shrotz. Says Rava, no. The ikala mifrach. You could argue against this comparison. And say malish shrotzim are more strict. Shekem etamim b'kadasha. The size of tumah is very small. It's the size of a lentil, and tumas meis, the part of a dead body to make someone tummy has to be a kazayis. So since it's more strict, maybe that's why it includes more materials. But tumas meis, that's not so strict in this aspect at least. Maybe it doesn't include more materials. Maybe it does not include oil of a behemoth tameya. So we cannot prove from tsaras and we cannot prove from shratzim. So here comes the term which we call chazer hadin. Yeah, hatzad hashavim. When we cannot learn a third halacha from two other halachas, from each one alone we cannot learn it. Well, you put the two together, and we're going to say 1 second. Are you going to try to tell me that the reason why tsaras applies to non-kosher animal skin is because threads can become tummy? That can't be the reason. Look at shratzim. If shratzim touch threads, the threads don't become tummy, and nevertheless the hide of a non-kosher animal becomes tummy. So that's not the reason. Okay. Now you might tell me that the reason why the hide of a non-kosher animal becomes tummy is because by shratzim, is because shiratzim make something tummy with the size of a lentil. That's not the reason. Look at tsaras. Tsaras is not making something with the size of a lentil, has been the size of a gris, of a bean, if someone could offer me the translation, of a larger type of bean. So the size of the lentil is not the reason. So his special reason is not the reason, and his special reason is not the reason. So why did the Torah say, let's try to compare to other things, let's try to see what's unique to these two things that causes, in the Torah's perspective, that non-kosher animal hide should become tummy? I have to look for the common denominator. The common denominator is that they are both things which make hide tummy. We know that already from before. And the Torah says that non-kosher hide is also tummy. Oil ames, we know that hide is tummy. We know that leather is tummy. Look at the Mishkan. The Mishkan had the skin of kosher animals, and it's definitely tummy. So these two things, the only common thing between them is that leather becomes tummy, that hide becomes tummy. So from that, I'll be able to learn that here also by oil ames, that hide becomes tummy. Also, non-kosher animal hide will become tummy. That's called the tzad hashavim. Let's see. Let tsaras prove tsaras makes things tummy with a smaller size than with a larger size than a hadasha. So the so we see that that's not the reason. That the small size of a lentil is not the reason why it should become tummy. The chazer hadin. 1 second. Ich nehme mit nicht mal denken. Ich will sagen 1 Minute. Second. Okay, yeah, خمس. The chazer hadin. We're going to go in circles. Each one has a different chumrah that the other one doesn't have. The this one doesn't have his chumrah, this one doesn't have that chumrah. So the chumras, the unique chumras, cannot be the reason. What could be the reason? The common denominator. What's the common denominator? That skin is tummy, and the Torah teaches us also the Torah says that a non-kosher animal skin has the same halacha like a kosher animal skin. From that I can learn to oil also, tummy. But we know already from the Mishkan that a skin becomes tummy. I'll say that a non-kosher animal skin is the same as a kosher animal skin. So, from this whole long drasha, Rava says that we could prove that non-kosher animal skin becomes tummy by Elames from the comparison of tsaras and shratzim together. The common denominator is that they make skin tummy, and the Torah tells us that it includes non-kosher skin. Also, we know that skin's tummy, so we'll include non-kosher skin. Only Rabbi Bar Nishla Ravashi, no. I could dismiss both of them together. Even the common denominator has something more strict than Oil Ames. She came to me with Pachas and Kazais. The Gemara thought till now that you don't look at a term less than a kazais, a lentil or a gris. No, this one's the lentil, this one's a gris. Okay, so each one is not the reason. No, but a lentil and a gris are both less than a kazais. So they're both more strict than the tumas meis. So maybe that's the unique thing. And therefore, a non-kosher animal skin is tummy. Tamer b'mei she'eni mitam ela b'kazais. Ela amar Rabbi Barnish, Asya b'kal v'chomer minoitza shel izim. We learn it out b'kal v'chomer from goats here. She'ein mitami b'negoyim. She'ein mitami b'negoyim. That, what do you call it? That tzaras, it does not go on goats here. And mitami b'oil ames. How do we know that from the Mishkan? The second covering of the Mishkan was from goats here, and we know b'gzeir Shabbat that wherever was a covering on the Mishkan is mitami b'oil ames. So, okay, so the conclusion is like this. We had a question whether non-kosher animal skin can become tummy b'oil ames. L'chatchila, we thought the question is, what was tachash? Was it kosher or not? And we learned tumas oil from Mishkan. So based on that, we'll know if non-kosher animal skin is tummy. Says Rabbi Yisrael, what are you talking about? Tachash is for sure kosher. Because you can only use for the Mishkan, something kosher. And we say it's similar to Tela Elon, to the Janet, whatever you call it. It's similar in color and the type of skin, but it's kosher. Says Rabbi, you're right, but still, the halacha is non-kosher animal skin can become tummy. Yeah? Why? Because, so I'll tell you, I learned it now from tzaras. Tzaras has an extra word, which tells me non-kosher animal skin. Okay, but tzaras can make also threads tummy. Okay. Shrotzim. Shrotzim makes skin tummy, and it says oy. Okay, shrotzim, the size that makes something tummy is a lentil. Okay. Let's put the two together. This one has a lentil, and this one has threads, but each one doesn't have the other specialty. What do they both have in common? They make skin tummy. So oil ames also makes skin tummy. So I'll say it includes also non-kosher animals, just like these two. Says Rabbi Mibarnish, no. They both have something unique. They both make things tummy less than a kazayis. Says Rabbi Mibarnish, I agree with you, Rabbi Lahalocha, but for a different reason. The reason why oil ames makes if you had non-kosher animal skin as an oil, it becomes tameh. I learned it from goats here material, whatever you call it. In the Mishkan, you had a covering made out of goats here, and from that we learned that by oil ames it becomes tameh, and it does not become tameh with tzaras. So if tzaras makes non-kosher animal skin tameh, for sure oil ames. That's the end. So we know that non-kosher animal skin becomes tameh. Okay. Yes.
Sure. Reb, this discussion between Saras and the Shrotzim, we had this recently, last stuff, right? To try to prove out.
Yeah.
But the last discussion, we didn't talk about the Tzad HaShava. We just left it. Why over here all of a sudden you trying to prove through the Tzad HaShava?
What do we try to learn? We try to learn from one to the other, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, so then Tzad HaShava was not relevant?
Right. Trying to learn from the Goyim to Shrotzim, there's no Tzad HaShava. But if I know something for a fact by the Goyim and by Shrotzim, then I can look for the Tzad HaShava. Yeah?
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen.